Back live with you tonight here on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Let's get back to our top story then tonight. The Jacob Zuma Foundation threatening legal action if President Cyril Ramaphosa doesn't reverse what it calls the illegal appointment of Raymond Zondo to the position of Chief Justice. Judges Mbekezeli Benjamin joins us now for more. Mbekezeli, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. We called you in because we know that you had observed that whole entire process quite closely in terms of its inception and the decision that it finally got up to. But the Jacob Zuma Foundation raising issues of disqualification. And one of the issues they're saying is a pertinent issue that should have disqualified Raymond Zondo as the Chief Justice was what he told the interviewees. And they're saying it's clearly untruthful and dishonest account of meetings privately held with former President Jacob Zuma, who is the patron of the foundation. Did that issue come up in that particular interview?
Excuse me. Good evening and good evening to the viewers. Well, I don't recall that incident or those private meetings being discussed during the interviews, but even if they were discussed and even if he was eventually appointed, why did the Jacob Zuma Foundation wait a whole year before they raised an issue with this? Because I think that's the most important fact in all of this, is that yes, even if they had certain objections to how the process unfolded, they had a lot of time to object to either the appointment or to the candidacy of Justice Zondo at the time, and subsequently they could have taken this on review. In fact, because of the delay rule in terms of the law, I don't think they can still proceed to court and set aside this appointment.
I remember we were talking a lot, Judges Better, around the weight of the nomination of the Judicial Service Commission versus the decision that the president finally makes. So one of the issues they're saying, well, as far as the scoring of all those who were nominated, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo scored the least. And so he should not have been considered above all the other three, I think, others that were there. How much weight does that scoring weigh as it is put against the prerogative of the president to finally make that decision, being given those names that have been nominated?
Well, that scoring counts for very little, I must say, because if you look at the Constitution in terms of Section 174, subsection 3, it says that the president is the one who appoints the Chief Justice, the Deputy Chief Justice, the President, and the Deputy President of the Supreme Court of Appeal. So the President has the prerogative for those top four positions in the judiciary. However, when he does those appointments, he must consult the JSC. So he must get the opinion of the JSC, and the JSC must advise him on the suitability of the candidates he's nominated for those positions. But ultimately, it is the decision of the president, and which is what happened here. The president nominated 4 people, and he said, JSC, please tell me whether these people are suitable for appointment. And the JSC did advise the president. Ultimately, the JSC said, our preference is Justice Maya over Justice Zondo and Justice Mlambo and Madlanga. But they had their own preferences. But the president was under no obligation to go with those preferences. He could very well have decided to appoint Justice Mlambo or Justice Madlanga for that matter, and nothing would have turned on that, because that is the powers that the Constitution gives the president. So in as much as the JSC decided to do a scoring, they could have decided on another method of recommending a candidate, or even recommending all 4 candidates. Ultimately, it is the president's decision.
Does the Constitution prescribe gender requirements here, gender transformation requirements, and therefore the president is bound by that section 174, subsection 2 of the Constitution, and the president kind of overlooked that?
So Section 174.2 says that the JSC, that section binds the JSC and all judicial appointments commissions, like the Magistrates Commission. It says that when appointing judicial officers, the commission must look at the composition of the judiciary and make sure that it broadly reflects the composition of the population of South Africa. So they must look at the gender composition of South Africa and the racial composition, and they must try and broadly reflect those in the judiciary when they make those appointments. So it binds mainly the JSC and less so the president. And so the president, for good reason, he could have appointed Justice Maya, or he could have appointed any other judge, and he wouldn't fall foul of Section 174(2) of the Constitution.
If an individual like myself, an individual like, I suppose former President Jacob Zuma is not an individual like myself because he's a former president and would have been privy to these processes. He knows what these processes would entail. But if somebody like that would have wanted to raise an objection to a decision that the president would have made, what are the correct channels to follow?
Well, the correct channel is to raise the objection before the interview, before the JSC sits to interview the candidate. But in this process that was followed by President Ramaphosa when he appointed the Chief Justice, there were actually two opportunities to raise an objection. You remember that there was a public call for nominations, firstly, and secondly, there was a public call for any comments on the candidates. And for those opportunities could have been used to raise an objection. And in fact, there were objections that were raised. I recall the public protector objected to one of the candidates. There were other bodies who objected to the candidate. And during the interview process, those objections were put to the candidate, and the candidate was required to respond. And based on their response, it could have shifted the suitability of the candidate. And the JSC would have told the president to say, look, the candidate you nominated, there was this objection, this is the response we got, and for that reason we believe the candidate is not suitable for appointment. And in those circumstances, the president would have needed to give a really, really strong reason why he would proceed to appoint that candidate despite what the JSC had told him. So how this process is supposed to be is that the JSC receives these comments from the public, and they then advise the president on the suitability of the appointment of a candidate based on the comments. So here in this situation, the letter that the Jacob Zuma Foundation disclosed doesn't say whether these objections were raised before the interviews. It doesn't say what happened after. What did the JSC disregard the objections, but more importantly, what happened after, because the appointment was made on the 1st of April 2022. By then, we knew that the president had made an appointment of Justice Zondo over other candidates. For those months that followed, they could have either written to the president or taken this decision to court, because really the only way to reverse such an appointment is to go to court, and the court would have dealt with it. Now it comes a year later. I don't think it will fly.
Yeah. Let's quickly, hoping that line will hold, look at the two demands that they are making and whether or not these are demands that the president could be able to meet. One, reverse this particular decision. Two, give us at least reasons that led to you not appointing Judge Maya and instead going with Chief Justice Raymond Zondo.
Well, let's start with the second one, the reasons for appointing one Justice Zondo over Justice Maya or any other of the two candidates that were nominated. Well, the president, it's his prerogative. He can choose to give those reasons. He can choose not to give those reasons. He is under no legal obligation, as I read the Constitution. He is under no legal obligation to give those reasons, but maybe out of the goodness of his heart, he can give them out. And I think that would be a good thing, in fact. And then going to the first one, whether the president can now reverse the appointment of the Chief Justice. The short answer is that he can't. Once the president has discharged his constitutional obligation to appoint the Chief Justice, he cannot reverse that decision. He cannot remove the Chief Justice. The only way that the decision can be set aside is if it is challenged in court and the court says this decision was irrational. and for that reason, the appointment should be set aside. But even so, that must be done within the 6 months of the appointment being made. So the deadline for doing so was October of 2022, and that deadline has come and passed. And then the only other way to remove the Chief Justice is through an impeachment process, which requires the Judicial Conduct Tribunal to make a finding, the JSC to make a recommendation that the Chief Justice be removed, and Parliament to vote by 2/3 to remove the Chief Justice. So it's not an easy process at all.
Mbekezeli Benjamin, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight. He's with Judges Matters there following that letter that has been making news tonight here on Newzroom Afrika. The lawyers of former President Jacob Zuma serving the president with a letter saying reverse your decision to appoint Raymond Zondo to the position of Chief Justice.